this leads me kind of to another question that I think is, or another topic that I think is really interesting. You know, you've worked at organizations of different sizes throughout your
Yeah,
career. Obviously, you're at probably the biggest organization or one of the biggest organizations right now. I'm in the
pretty
startup
big.
space. I'm kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum. And Daryl, I think, is more in the middle. I'm curious, recruiters at these different sizes of organizations often have different types of duties and
Oh, for
responsibility.
sure.
But what skills do you think are important for recruiters in any setting to develop in order to thrive in a tough market or a competitive market? Like, is there
Yeah.
any kind of crossover that you see between, recruiters in the startup space, recruiters in the large enterprise space? Like, is there any kind of skills that need to be developed regardless of where they're at?
I really feel like the one universal skill for all recruiters, despite company size, agency, corporate, whatever, is intellectual curiosity.
Mm,
Mm.
We have to constantly be hoping to learn, seeking to understand. And that's everything from what's the big high level business problem you're solving, VP, all the way down to, hey, welder, I'm trying to hire. What's most important to you? Is it compensation? Is it hours? Is it, commute? Like, so it's having that curiosity with all the conversations and all the directions that we're moving, and taking in that information and understanding where other people are coming from. That idea of not only curiosity but then also being able to lead with empathy and understanding is so
Mm.
so so underutilized and under discussed. I wish we talked more about that in recruiting. We get so hung up on, well, I'm a big biller and I did this, or I work for this FANG company, I've made it. Oh, do you know how many recruiters work for FANG companies? We're as mediocre as anybody else
yeah.
in some cases, right? So that's hardly a measure, right? All by itself. But we get sometimes caught up on the wrong things.
hmm
And I always just want to be a lifelong student. I want to constantly be learning. I like moving into new technical areas or whatever. And that's, I think, where a big company can be kind of cool because you can sometimes make those moves without leaving your organization. But there's also something to be said for like fractional recruiting for startups, or, I mean, there's so many cool ways to do this, but it all comes down to curiosity and learning and empathy.
Yeah, that was
Love that.
excellent. Yeah, that's great. I think a kind of a side note to that is taking ownership, right? And what I mean by that is
Yeah, huge.
I think a lot of times recruiters, for whatever reason, don't like to view themselves as a salesperson. And I
Right.
understand why. I think it feels, for some people, they hear that term and they think it's snaky or something like that. But I think the reality is recruiters really need to own that top of funnel, right? Like aside from
Mm-hmm,
just
mm-hmm.
scheduling pre-screens, managing resumes coming in, that pre-screen call or that initial contact with a candidate is much more important than I think most recruiters realize. Like that is where you're going to really captivate the interest of candidates, and maybe candidates that typically wouldn't consider a company of your size or your scope, or maybe the role is a little bit less
Sure.
or different than what they're looking for.
Absolutely.
If you can really own that storytelling process, and when I say storytelling process, what I mean is really understanding the business, the journey, where we're going, what's the vision, what's the mission, what do we do, what problems do we
Yeah.
solve, how
Yeah.
does it make the world a better place? If you can own that piece and really tell a great, compelling story, you really set yourself up to potentially bring really highly qualified candidates into the pipeline that you might not typically get in a normal scenario, if that makes any sense. So
Oh,
think
100%.
I think it's like aligned perfectly with what you said, but it's just that curiosity and then taking ownership and really like, I know Daryl has experienced this because he moved from tech to, the aerospace industry recently.
Right.
He's having to absorb and basically learn a new space. But if he could
Yeah.
take ownership of that and really dive into that and own that top of the funnel, it's really, at least in my experience, it really increases the quality of candidates that you get into your pipeline and potentially even the
Hmm.
volume of that as well.
Absolutely. And not to wax too poetically here, but think about just the human experience. Like storytelling is the one common theme since the dawn of time. Sitting around,
Yeah.
campfires talking about the saber-toothed tiger that chased you or
Hmm.
whatever. I don't know, but that is such a like common, unique, like human. Common and
Yeah.
unique probably don't go together, but you know what I'm saying. There's this. Like that's just something that we have always done and is maybe unique to our species, which is kind of cool. And how do you do that effectively at scale? How do you do that on the internet where there is so much noise? And frankly, a lot of the
Hmm.
noise is fake, false, lies, whatever. And so picking through the stories and finding the ones that are true and that resonate, that's really the key. And
Hmm.
that's both working with our hiring leaders and like, let me tell you this candidate story. That's working with the candidates. Let me tell you the story of this great organization. All directions. Like storytelling is such a amazing, important skill for recruiters.
Totally.
When I was listening to Amy talk about intellectual curiosity at the start, and then Andrew added kind of storytelling, I was like,
Yeah.
Andrew, you stole what I was going to share. I was going to talk about storytelling,
We're all,
but
we're all passing around the same brain cell here.
yeah, I'm like, dang, we're on the same wavelength here. But because I was thinking about it as you guys were talking, I'm like, what is like one skill that every recruiter really should kind of cultivate, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to kind of story tell, share a narrative, because it's used in every facet of our work. You know, when you get on that, like Andrew was alluding to, when you get on that initial phone screen, often you're giving the narrative of the company, you're selling them on the vision, the product, whatever. And then you take that candidate and that resume, and I'm going to the hiring manager, and it's like, if they're slightly under the bar of where they need to be, it's like we're advocating for them, we're
Yeah.
storytelling, we're
Mhm.
sharing the candidate. And then, like, kind of like Amy's talking about, you're going to, a lot of time, you're going to those leaders and those decision makers, and so there's so much storytelling, and I
Yeah.
share this with job seekers all the time. They come to me, and the first thing, it's a different discussion, but they'll say like, how can my resume be better? How can my resume be better? I'm like, get better at telling your story. I'm
Mhm.
like,
Exactly.
a resume is a piece of paper. When you get on the phone with a recruiter, the people that are successful are the ones that just share a concise, clear, and compelling, with those
Mm-hmm.
three C's,
Mhm.
story. And so
Yeah.
it's it's a big one.